Hey everyone! So I want to make a Roblox game, specifically one based on Duck Game. If you didn't know, Duck Game is a fast-paced multiplayer action game where you control ducks with guns. They jump, shoot, slide, throw stuff, glide, act dead, and, of course, quack. But today I'll be focusing on the movement. Also, my friend Blender Engineer will be helping me throughout the project, so check him and his game out if you haven't already. The first thing Blender recommended me to do is to make a plan for my game. A plan helps you limit the scope of your project, so it's easier to finish the game. So for example, I have all of these tasks, and I can edit its importance, description, subtasks, so I'll put the movement system task into in progress list. Let's get started. First, we need to make sure we can only move in 2D. So what's a better way than to just search for a random YouTube video that shows how to do it? After inserting the given script at the correct position, our character now only moves in 2D. I just need to make sure it can jump with the W key as well. Speaking of jumping, Roblox characters jump continuously while the jump button is pressed, but I need them to only jump once. So I fixed it by setting the jumping state to false after a jump has been triggered. Next up is the camera. So we tried out a bunch of Roblox's default cameras, but none of them were what we wanted. So we settled on a camera that was linked in the video from before. But this is a temporary solution because Duck Game uses a more advanced camera that can track all of the players in the level. To test out the changes, I used a random Donkey Kong level from the toolbox, but then I noticed that the character wasn't instantly turning around like in Duck Game. To fix that, Blender gave me a long line of code. After a few adjustments, it worked just like I wanted. I then decided to make my own stage. The character kept on climbing up the parts, so I disabled it with a script I found. Now it's time to add crouching. To do that, we'll need a crouching animation, which we can make by going to Avatar, clicking on Rig Builder, selecting an avatar, and then clicking Animation Editor, and selecting the rig. In the Animation Editor, I will be turning on Inverse Kinematics. What it basically does is, it makes the movement more natural by moving all of the parts around the selected one as well. Then I spent the next few minutes attempting to pose my character. And this was the result. To use this animation, you need to click on the 3 dots, publish to Roblox, give it a name, then save. We'll need the ID for later, so copy it and close. Now that we have the animation, we can add it to the character and paste in the animation ID we copied earlier. Also, let's not forget to rename the animation. Now back to scripting. First things first, we need a onCrouch function that we can just copy from onJump function and change a few things. And of course, we need to bind it to the S key. To play the animation, we need to add the animation track variable and load the animation. Then, if the character is crouching, we can play the animation, and if it's not, we can stop it. And it works, but it's a little off. First off, the time it takes to transition into the pose is too long, so I removed the transition by placing 0 as the argument in play and stop functions. Then Blender suggested that the animation priority might be causing some issues, so I changed it as well. But I still wasn't happy with the results, so I disabled Inverse Kinematics and made a simple pose just like that. After adjusting the animation fade time, this was the result. It looks kinda silly, but I like it. Next up, sliding. After posing the character, I once again set up the animation. It was time to add some logic. First, I added a couple of variables. One tracks if the player is sliding, the other if the down button is being pressed. I replaced crouching with pressing down since you won't always be crouching when pressing down. And I changed the function's name to reflect that as well. Just like with crouching, I added a check to play the sliding animation when sliding is true. I also disabled movement when the player is either crouching or sliding. For the next piece of logic, I'll need a function that checks if the player is on the ground. This can be done by checking if the humanoid's floor material is not air. Okay, so the movement logic goes like this. If you don't press the down button, you won't slide or crouch. But if you do press the button, if you're in the air, you will be crouching. If you're on the ground and you're moving, you will be sliding. Now the problem is, the character won't slide if you don't hold a move key, because move direction is exactly that. Which key is being pressed down, A or D? So we have to add a previous movement variable that's only calculated when the player is not crouching and not sliding. Let's not forget to add crouching when you're just pressing the down key. I placed the lines of code that move the character after if not crouching and not sliding check to utilize the previous movement so the character can actually slide and not stop immediately. Except I didn't add slowing down, so now it's sliding infinitely. So then of course I fixed that. Now let's pause here just one moment. Take a look at this. Right now the speed at which the character decelerates is bound to the frame rate. This line causes that. It makes the onUpdate function run every frame, but it also gives the function a variable called delta time. It's basically the time it took to render the previous frame. And by multiplying the speed decrease with it, I solved the problem. I'll just need to play with the speed decrease value a bit. Now let's get back to the present. The character was shaking and facing forwards for some reason. Turns out the shaking was due to move direction value flickering between positive and negative. So I took the absolute value of previous moment and compared it against a small number. This way any number smaller than that one won't impact the movement. By using math.sign on previous moment in the pivot to line, I fixed the forward facing bug. What math.sign does is it turns all negative values into -1 and all positive ones into 1. But I still wasn't able to slide under blocks. Turns out I just had to reduce the hip height when sliding and crouching. Except I left a little bug in there. Can you see it? Yep, the crouching hip height will never be set, because the sliding check will override it. So I just put them in one if-else statement. Now we can slide under stuff. But sometimes, if you stop sliding too early, you can get stuck under a part. We can fix this with raycasts. A raycast is just a laser that will return some info if it hits something. Now I don't have any footage for the next section, so you'll just have to listen to me yap while I show the finished screenshots. To create a raycast, you write workspace:/raycast, and in the parentheses you write the origin point, a vector 3 that contains the direction and length of the ray, and raycast parameters. I have a function that generates them. You just need to include a filter of what the raycast can hit. In this case, it's the parts that make up the stage. As for the function itself, it generates new parameters, sets the filter to include stuff, then sets the filtered items and returns the parameters. Now, to actually use a raycast's results, you need to store it in a variable. We actually have two raycasts for reasons I'll explain later, and this is just a visualizer I found on the toolbox. At this point I should mention that there is a new variable called previous state that does what it says. Let's start from the beginning. This is of course happening in onUpdate function. If not pressing down and if previous state, then we get origin points, which are head and foot. After casting the rays we check if any of them hit something. If yes, then based on previous state we set the current state. Now if we slide under something, lasers will be shot out to check if we can stand up. But the problem is, we're stuck now. To fix it, we move the character towards the direction it's facing. Now you can continue sliding with a click of a button. By the way, this is what happens if you only have one raycast. In Duck Game, you can flap your wings to fall down slowly using the jump button. In Roblox, we don't have wings, so I just called it gliding. To implement it, we'll first need the player's velocity. Then, if the player's gliding is not on ground, not crouching, and the velocity.y is lower than gliding speed, then we can set the character's velocity to itself, but change the y value to gliding speed. Now the character falls down slowly while the jump button is being pressed. We can also add max falling speed the same way. Another little thing I added is disabling the gliding when jumping to make it so you have to click the jump button again to glide. And that's it for today. If you want to see how I made one-way platforms, please leave a like and a comment on this video. Well, see ya.